We're joined now by David Sanger. He's a national security correspondent for the New York Times who's reported extensively on North Korea. He's also the author of a new book, The Perfect Weapon. It's about cyber warfare shaping a new age of global politics. David, it's so good to have you here. This has been an unusual round of diplomacy, to use a term. Even this latest wrinkle, revealing that Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, had some initial contact with someone in business who helped make a connection with the North Koreans. But you yourself are on the ground in Singapore, and you asked the president at the press conference for some details on what he agreed to. Were you satisfied with the answer?
We didn't really get many answers. Look, Margaret, I commend the whole move by the president to go have a direct talk with Kim Jong-un. We've been trying one method for 35 years now of trying to work from the bottom up and got nowhere with North Korea. Every agreement, even agreements far more specific than what the president reached in Singapore, has been violated. But what I've been concerned about as I've watched this unfold is that the president got from Kim Jong-un only the word complete denuclearization, less than his father and his grandfather had given the United States in very specific agreements in the past. And the president's attitude about this when he came back was, we're no longer under nuclear threat from North Korea. Well, we haven't even started. You'll know you're under no nuclear threat from North Korea when you can check off a list of the things they've given up, everything from weapons to production facilities to missiles to the chemical and biological and even the cyber weapons. Right now, we're no place close to that. We're exactly where we were with a much improved tone. You don't know how long that'll last.
And we don't know what the next step is. The president said the Secretary of State would have an upcoming meeting. He said he might even call the North Koreans today. What happens next?
Well, presumably what happens next is something a lot like what you and I covered in the days of the Iran negotiations. You're going to have a very detailed series of meetings that will probably extend over several years in which the North Koreans are going to have to unwind this. In the interim, North Korea has 20 to 60 nuclear weapons. Their game here is to be recognized as a de facto nuclear state, and they're hoping that they're not giving up everything, that this is an arms control talk in which they just give up a little bit.
It's interesting you say that, a de facto nuclear state. You write in this new book about essentially the U.S. underestimating North Korea on a lot of fronts, including in terms of their cyber capabilities. That's not something we're talking about as part of this agreement necessarily, but how much of a threat are they?
Well, what's interesting is that the only way North Korea has actually attacked the United States in the past few years, and has done it repeatedly, has been with cyber. Now, we were right to focus on nuclear weapons. Their effects are calamitous. Cyber, in many ways, is the opposite of a nuclear weapon. It is targeted, it's stealthy, and thus it's very hard to deter. And so it was the North Koreans who came in and took out 70% of the computing power at Sony Pictures. It's the North Koreans who actually cleaned out a good deal of the Bangladeshi central bank of $81 million going through the New York Fed. It's the North Koreans who've done other attacks in the U.S., along with the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese. What's happened over time is that countries have begun to recognize that cyber is the main way that they can undercut each other, they can take action without getting a military response. And our problem has been we haven't figured out how to deter it.
And you've talked about as well the lack of U.S. response when it comes to what Russia carried out on this country with cyber hacking during the Obama years.
That's right. You know, I was thinking as you were talking with Mayor Giuliani and others, you know, we forget that the origins of all of this was the Russia hack of the DNC. But before the DNC happened, the Russians were into the White House, the State Department, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And in each of those cases, the Obama administration, like administrations before them, didn't name the Russians publicly, didn't punish the Russians for this. They fought them for 2 weeks to try to get them out of the White House computer systems and never said anything publicly. This is all sort of laid out in the book.
All of this,
yeah, I remember when this was all going on. And the State Department communications were down when we were in Vienna at various moments during the Iran negotiations because they were trying to clear the Russians out of their system. They made no effort to punish the Russians for this, viewing it as sort of old-time espionage, which it wasn't. And so if you're Vladimir Putin, and you're thinking to yourself, if they wouldn't fight me back about the White House, why are they going to worry about the Democratic National Committee?
And that is an extraordinary challenge for the new head of Cyber Command. David, this is a great read, The Perfect Weapon. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Margaret.
We will be back with more Face the Nation in a moment.